Hi everybody. Today the discussion is about slab rolling. In the next few segments we're going to do some of that, and we are going to do it a couple of different ways. Later on we're going to get into the depths of the slab roller, and today's clay is sitting on top of my slab roller, but immediately beneath it is a piece of sheetrock or drywall that I have taped. And I only brought it over because I wanted something to set the clay upon while I was talking to you, getting set up. This is I don't know if you can see that on frame, but this is a broken piece of sheetrock that I won't keep using, but I had it handy to set the clay on. This clay was used a few weeks ago. I've kept it moist. It's scrap. It was a failed extrusion. And I just kept it wet under a towel and some plastic, and you can see it's not been wedged at all. It's still full of gaps and air spaces and such. And I brought it out because earlier this week I should say, on clay extruding and rolling, the subject of whether or not you need a porous surface on which to wedge your clay came up. And that interested me. I thought, hey, I've never really tried wedging my clay on something that isn't porous, always thinking that the clay would stick and become a nuisance, and that you're obligated to use something porous like this sheetrock or something else. And so I thought, well, I'd start off seeing what I could do with this in terms of wedging, and put it right here on top of my slab roller surface. This is what do they call this stuff? Melamine, I guess. It's a non-porous plastic type stuff that's in use by North Star for their slab roller tops and such. So here we go. Let's just see what I can do with this. This is some pretty moist clay, and we'll see what happens. Looks like other than a little bit of this, it's working pretty well. The one thing that this doesn't do, or maybe does do, is it helps keep some moisture in the clay. So if you're worried about that, if you don't want a lot of moisture to be wicked out of your clay while you're working it up. This is especially the case with some earthenware clay that tends to really get dry and crack really fast. Some stonewares, depending on how you've prepared them or if they're new out of the bag, they're pretty moist to begin with. Oh, there's a little bit sticking. But this would help keep some of the moisture in the clay, whereas using a porous surface would wick a lot of the moisture out. And so I don't know, this isn't bad, it slides. But I'd say, because of the way I've always done it, I'm more inclined to use something like my wedging board that I set up. I suppose I could even, it's not very stable, but I could get away with doing my wedging work on this piece of sheetrock. The best thing to do though, if you're working on a surface like this tabletop, is to get yourself what I call a wedging board, and I'll cut away and set it all back up because we're going to get into the discussion of how to make some slabs manually. But I'll put it in place and do a little bit more wedging so you see how it works. So I'll be right back. Okay, and also I apologize to some of those of you who might have difficulty hearing this, or you're accustomed to seeing people's faces when they talk, making it easier to hear. I have to do this with my hands essentially, so I really don't expect to be on camera, so you won't be seeing my lips move, so I apologize for that. But I hope I'm speaking loudly enough and clearly enough, and that the microphone is picking it all up well enough that you can learn from this and not find it too inconvenient. Now, as I said, here's my wedging board. It's a piece of, I've shown it before, it's a piece of canvas that has been completely glued to a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. It's canvas on both sides. I completely wrapped it. I glued it and stapled it, and then I put these cleats on it. I hope you can see that. Then I'll back it up a bit. Put these cleats, they're identical on the other side, and those are designed so when I push up against my table, they hold the board in place. I have it over here so that I can flip the board over and use the other side. Now, most of these I've made were designed so that I could use one side for white clays like this, and then I could flip it over and use the other side for a colored clay. So that's essentially the idea, and I've explained that in step-by-step photos on the clay group as well as I think in one of the books. Anyway, so a little bit about wedging. And God, you can't devote a whole video to wedging. This is the bulldog wedge, I think some people call it. The idea there, or monkey face, or whatever you want to call it. The idea is simply to get a sense that you have done a good job with a spiral wedge that'll push the air out. And if you want to know a lot more about wedging, maybe one of your basic pottery books will illustrate it, or other YouTube videos, but that's about as much as I'm going to give it today. We're going to move right on to how to make a slab out of this, and I'm going to get set up for that next. Okay, here before me, is what I was calling on the clay and extruding group, my $50 or less slab roller. And it's pieces and parts, and you don't need all of them at once. So in front of you is a little collection of rolling pins. I found these at, I don't know where I found these, secondhand stores, tag sales. I've had others over the years that didn't hold up as well, or that my wife took away from me for use in the kitchen. This is a cool one. This one was given to me by Sharon Reeves, and I'm going to do a little cutaway so that you can see all the contact information for Sharon and where she sells these. They have little elves or gnomes, really cool looking, and she has a variety of these, I believe, still. So I'll do a cutaway so you can get the details on that. If I post this on YouTube, I'll put it down in the description section. But I'm going to use this to see what it does. I have to confess I haven't used it yet, but I thought, hey, this is the time. One other thing to mention is I have here on the table a little slab roller I got at the dollar store, Walmart, someplace. If you're working with a wedging board like I had there, and you haven't used it in a while, obviously it's going to get very dry and very dusty. And I recommend giving this, or your canvas, I'll do this later, give your canvas a little spray down. It doesn't have to be soaked, just a nice misting. And that will keep the clay dust from going up in your face, especially if you're slamming clay down on it. So this will be sitting here, and I'll use it later. So for now, here's what we have. Firstly and foremostly, on top of that clay wedging board is a really sturdy piece of white paper that I found, and I'm going to use this throughout. Find yourself some heavy craft paper, the brown type. Find something like this that's resistant to tearing, and you can control the amount of moisture absorption, or when it does absorb moisture, it stays intact nicely. This is what I'm going to use, and I'll show you why. The other thing that we're going to use, I'll set these over here. The other thing that we're going to use are, these are yardsticks or meter sticks, depending on where in the world you are, that I cut in half. And I have 3 over here and 3 over here to start out. And when I have them stacked like this, they make a stack that's 3/4 of an inch thick. I'm going to show you how we're going to use these to get the slab created consistently. And then there's a small problem that I'll address as I go, but I think it's something that is surmountable. But I didn't complete it or resolve it. I'm going to leave it to you maybe to help me figure out a way to go about this. So we're going to get started, and of course we need some clay, and I have that clay that I was wedging just a little bit ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this pretty close just by hand. Oops. Don't mind that the paper slides, it doesn't make any difference. I'm going to move it down by hand like you would. Keep moving it over, keep turning it, and start getting it close to where you can start to use your rolling pin on it. Get that far, get a sense of what kind of shape you want your slab to be it rounded or elongated. And when you feel like you're getting close, it's getting close to the time when you'll start rolling your rolling pin and then rolling the slab out until it's level with this first stack. So that's what we're going to get started with in just a second. I'll be right back. The rolling pin that I'm going to use is one that I actually paid some real money for. I went to a restaurant supply store in Los Angeles many years ago when I realized I was going to start doing some pretty good sized slabs, even though I had a slab roller, by the way. When I realized I wanted to do more like this, I went into that store and bought several items, but I saw this and thought, hey, this is the time to buy that. So I think I spent somewhere north of $25 or more back in those days. Of course, it's been 30 years or more since I bought it. But this is the one I'm going to use because I want this slab to get pretty big, and it's going to get wider than my little rolling pins. So as I'm talking, you're getting the idea of what I'm trying to do. I'm using the rolling pin with a fair amount of exertion. And then I'm not ready to take the yardsticks off yet. And I can start, as I do this, I can start to feel that I'm not moving the clay anymore, and I'm rolling smoothly across the top of the sticks. That simply means that I'm ready to take 2 away. And by that, these are 1/4 of an inch thick each. Now I'm ready to move the slab down to these 2 sticks, which will make the slab 1/2 an inch thick. Okay, so continue again. Start in the middle of the slab, moving it out lightly, controlling the shape of it. Flip the clay over perpendicularly and over. And again, you're trying to do this based on what kind of shape you're trying to make. If you're working toward a round shape, then you're going to move the clay accordingly. Don't try to do it all at once. It overstretches the clay. And as I said, when you finally get to the point where you feel like you're not moving the clay anymore, you can check it by flipping it over. Now I feel like before that the rolling pin is moving smoothly across the 2 sticks, so I know that this slab at this point is 1/2 an inch thick. So we're going to discuss a problem for the next phase of this, and I'll get it situated and we'll talk about that. Okay, so like I said, here we are down to a slab that's 1/2 an inch thick. For some of your projects, that may be perfect. That's going to make a fairly thick piece of clay that you may be planning to carve into or otherwise, in which case you're at your stopping point. But I found that I was trying to get oftentimes down to a slab that was about 3/8 of an inch thick, and here's the problem. If I went ahead and took 2 more of these sticks away and kept rolling, I'm going to end up with a slab that's 1/4 of an inch thick. A little too thin. It happens to be good for my sake. It happens to be pretty good for some of my box ends on my hollow extrusions. But for a lot of other things, this is a little too thin. The gap in my inner and outer parts of my extruder dies measures about 3/8 of an inch. So that's wherein lies the problem. Now, to illustrate the technique fully, I'm going to continue so you get a sense of what I'm up to here. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to make the slab, take it down to 1/4 of an inch thick. And one thing I want to show is that this paper, sturdy as it is, gives me the opportunity to move the clay without a whole lot of sticking or trouble or unnecessary texture from the canvas and such. So I like working with heavy duty paper like this, or as I said, the brown craft paper is ideal. You can use it and reuse it, roll it back up, keep using it for other projects. So there you have it. This is the essential idea: is move your slab roller over your sticks, as I have with each iteration, to show that you've gotten it down to the correct thickness. What to do, though, about getting a slab that's 3/8 of an inch thick. And I contemplated that a little bit before I started the videos and thought, well, what's the best way to tell them? And the answer is to come up with some other stick that's 3/8 of an inch thick, build one out of scraps or otherwise, or find that from your own experience and what your project demands in terms of consistency and thickness, you may opt to get to down to the 1/2 inch stack like these are, and from there take all the sticks away and just roll very carefully until you've brought your slab down to the 3/8 of an inch carefully. But when you do that, there's a risk that you're not going to be consistent. If you want consistency, the answer is simple. You're going to need to find shims like this that are, the last of which stops at 3/8 rather than 1/4. So therein lies the problem. We can talk about that on the clay group, but it's good just to present that to you for discussion and consideration. And I'll bet you, as a community, we can come up with some good ideas. While I was chatting, I ran my end of my rib through what appear to be bubbles. I'm not surprised because I didn't do a real careful job of wedging. Now, before I end this, let's talk about the anatomy of a slab. Right in here would be the best part of the slab. That's where the clay has the least amount of stretch and distortion. Out here on the edges, you have where the clay has been stretching and moving out, and it's the area where if you were to take something that you were cutting and you went out to all the way out to these edges, here's where you run the highest risk of something that you don't want happening, some cracking or otherwise. So I tend to avoid this area if it's like a lot like this, unless you want it, unless there's an art project you're trying to do, maybe you want that. But otherwise, get away from that stuff and save this for re-wedging and use for something else. Try to put your project and try to determine the size of what you're making as far as the slab goes based on how much of this heart sweet spot you want, so that you don't have to depend on this peripheral area for any part of your project. So that's something to give some thought to. Now, before I end this, I want to play with Sharon Reeves' cool gnome roller. This thing looks just like a kick in the pants to play with. Let's see what kind of marks I can make with it. So, I hope you can hear me okay. I'm trying to use a better quality microphone for this, and let me know if you're having trouble. Oh, that thing's cool. You only really should try to get one roll when you're trying to do these, use these embossing type rollers. But I wonder if you can see that. Let me step over while I'm talking to you. Let me step over and see how that looks on the frame. I think what I'll do is, when I get done with the video, I'll take some stills and come in close so you can get a better look at it. But that thing's really cool. So you might give some thought to getting something like this, or heck, making one of your own. Do some carving or drilling in a roller that you find someplace at a sale and carve away. See what you can make. That's pretty neat. Remember, when you do any kind of etching into a roller, you're going to get embossed shapes. That's a lot of fun. So thanks, Sharon. I'm glad I got around to putting this in a video to show people how it works. Nice sharp lines the way this is lasered in too. Really cool. So that's it, folks. Like I said, we're going to come back and do some more of this. I'm going to get the slab roller machine, my Northstar 36, Super 36 all set up, and we'll go from there. So there you have the cheaper roller 50 that I talked about, and you can get an idea what kind of job it does. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'll be back soon.